would say the fact that I was born a Negro in this country. More concretely, I felt there was no way for me not to be involved with what impressed me as being the most significant, the most important, the most loaded demonstration to free Americans that has ever happened in this country.
Well, we'll talk more about that later, but first let's quickly get from each and every one of you, Mr. Brando, have you been on this road for a long time?
I don't know. There was a time when nobody was on the road, really. There was a time when Rosa Parks stood up in a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and from that date, the Montgomery bus boycott took place. In somewhere in the 50s, 8 Negroes in a Georgia prison camp broke their legs with sledgehammers to bring attention to the condition that they were in. And slowly, bit by bit, I became involved in this issue, and my springboard was listening to Martin Luther King speak about the woe and distress in California.
Writer, producer, director.
Well, like all Americans, I've been involved in what I call human rights ever since I was born in this country. I think that what has happened to me recently is that I've become violently aware of the urgency of human rights in America now. The fact that this is an inalienable thing and something that must exist if America is to exist, and if our image is to exist, and if our moral fiber is to exist. And this urgency and my awareness of it brought me here.
I felt this sense of urgency myself, Mr. Poitier, and I noticed today, all day long, in all of the speeches and all of the placards, I saw the word or heard the word now, 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 repeated with insistency. Was it for you a case of urgency and now, or has this been something that you've been fighting for a long time?
Well, the nature of my life over the last 36 years has been such that the urgency that was evident today has been bubbling in me personally for most of these years, at least most of the years I came into adulthood. I became interested in the civil rights struggle out of a necessity to survive, and I think my interest started many years ago, never as intensely, however, as it exists today.
How about a personal participation, such as today's extraordinary participation? Is this a rare experience for you?
No, it is not a rare experience for me. I found, having lived in New York and in other parts of America over the last 20 years, since I came from the Caribbean, I found it necessary for self-protection and to perpetuate my survival that I involve myself in any activity that would ease my burden momentarily.
And what was the involvement of...
2 years ago, I picketed some restaurants in Oklahoma, but without one exception, up until very recently, like most Americans, I expressed my support of civil rights largely by talking about it at cocktail parties, I'm afraid. But again, like many Americans this summer, I could no longer pay only lip service to a cause that was so urgently right and in a time that is so urgently now.
See, many of us have felt, I particularly as a reporter around the world, I've seen things happen in certain countries at a given moment where what the French call a prise de conscience takes place, a sudden awareness of the problem. Now, I know in your case this hasn't been sudden. You've been very active in the civil rights movement, have you not?
Yes, I have.
Could you tell us a bit about your own role in...
It's something that I inherited, or at least struggled. I got it from my mother, my father, and they got it from their mother and their fathers. And to be in Washington today was for me an accumulation of a number of generations of black Americans who have been trying to appeal to the conscience of white supremacy and a superior force that has denied and disenfranchised for so long. And that to be in Washington was for me today a beginning, really, a kind of a climax to generations of hope. having been deeply immersed and having been at the beginning of so many important civil rights issues in this country and demonstrations, it was indeed a very powerful moment to see 200,000 people, mostly black people, but also white people, and to know that a nation such as America, and the reason that I struggle with it so hard and I grapple with it so hard is because I really believe in the potential of this country. And this country has not realized its potential. It has not even begun to scratch its surface in the humanities. And because I do feel strongly about that potential and because of the kind of inheritance I've had, it was necessary for me to be there today.
You are, I think, one of the lieutenants of Martin Luther King, who's one of the most respected leaders of the movement. We all heard Mr. King say today that this was perhaps the greatest day for freedom in modern American history. Perhaps we could ask Mr. Brando to tell us what that means to him. Do you think then, if it's the greatest day for freedom, if this is the beginning of some tremendous change in our country, and if so, how do you see it developing?
Well, this is a revolution, of course, that is sweeping our country now, and that if it ends up properly, perhaps Indians will be given some of their land back that they have rightful claims on by treaty. Certainly the benefit of all minorities, Jews, Filipinos, Chinese, Negroes, Hindustani, Koreans, all people will benefit. Today was an unprecedented event in that it is the only time in history, I believe, in America, when over 200,000 people have gathered to say with one voice and with one spirit, one cause. And I think that it's easy to oversimplify this problem. The problem seems to me a subtler one, and it has to do with hatred. It's true that the Avambundu tribe